All right, let's get started in Chapter 4. Chapter 4 is going to be about communications and documentation. First, communicating with your patient and the different age groups that you'll be communicating with and communicating with other public safety agencies and personnel. And documentation of your run call report for future references. So, applies fundamental knowledge of the EMS system, safety, well-being, and advanced AEMT, medical legal, ethical issues to the provision. So, therapeutic communication, we're going to talk about adjusting communication strategies for age, stage of development, patients with special needs, and a differing cultures that we have, other than what your culture is locally. Some interviewing techniques, verbal diffusion strategies, family presence issues, and dealing with. So, communication needed to call for resources, transfer care of the patient, interact within the team structure, EMS communication systems, communication with other healthcare professionals, and team communication and dining. So, as far as documentation, recording patient findings, truthful findings, and principles of medical documentation and report. So, communication is the transmission of information to another person. It is an essential component of the pre-hospital care. A fully functioning EMS communication system links you with other members of your team as well as with responders from other involved EMS, fire, EMS, and law enforcement. So, excellent communication is also a large integral part of transferring information about the patient's care to the nurses and physicians at the receiving hospital, which is very important. A lot of times, this communication gets misinterpreted sometimes. We don't always get to communicate everything we needed to. Or sometimes, it changes once we get to the hospital and the patient changes their story. So, verbal communication skills enable you to gather information from the patient and bystanders at an emergency scene. So, sometimes that patient, we're going with implied consent because of the automail status or unresponsiveness of the patient. So, we may have to get some information from a bystander, or sometimes that patient's just in so much pain that, they're not willing to talk to you. So, we may have to find out something from bystanders at that scene also. Wreck scenes, a lot of bystanders can tell you kind of what happened when a patient may not remember, what happened. It does make it possible for you to coordinate with the responders who are often present at the scene. Sometimes those responders can give you information also about the mechanism of injury or patient care related issues, so that you don't have to repeat it and you can lessen your time either on the scene or you don't have to do a redundancy of questions to your patient. Sometimes we get that patient thought, didn't you talk to somebody else? I've already answered this question 10 times. Also having good listening skills that allow you to fully understand the nature of the scene and the patient's problem. Documentation can be either written or electronic. Record of care becomes part of the patient's permanent medical record. Demonstrates that appropriate care was delivered. It helps others and may participate in patient's care and future care. So I've said this before in some other chapters, but that PCR, especially that electronic PCR, it covers and it goes on with this patient from the time the incident happened to the time that they are discharged from wherever to go home. Whether that be a rehab facility, or an extended care facility of some sort. So that documentation always follows that patient. So, but please remember, don't let documentation hinder patient care. So, if you got something you need to do for your patient as far as patient care, please do that, and then you can get to your documentation later. Radio and telephone communications. This links you to other members of fire, EMS, law enforcement. So you need to understand your local communication system and what you can and cannot do. Okay, and how to use that system efficiently and effectively. You know, you may have a main channel. You may be on a what we call a 800 megahertz or the Viper system here locally, and your surrounding agencies, maybe on a different system. Maybe they're still in the VHF system or the UHF system. Maybe they're on a high band UHF system. So you have to understand how you can communicate, not only within your agency, but also with agencies that surround you. What's your daily operational policy as far as communications also. If you and multiple other agencies, public safety agencies, get dispatched to the same incident, do you turn around and go to a certain channel, maybe a talk around group or what we call an operational channel locally, so that you all can talk, amongst each other on one channel. However, we do try to here locally go back to our main dispatch channels to talk to our telecommunicators at the dispatch center. That way they're not having to listen to multiple channels at one time. So make sure you understand your local policies and procedures. All right. Therapeutic communication is uses verbal and nonverbal communication techniques and strategies to encourage patients to express how they really do feel. If we come up with attitude, then that patient may not, feel that attitude and may not talk back. If we come up with a care and empathy attitude and expressions, then that patient is more willing to tell us what's going on and how we can help them. So achieve a positive relationship with the patient. This is a chart that shows, some factors and strategies to consider during communication. Depending on the patient's age, whether to make eye contact, body language as far as your facial expression, clothing as far as, what gender they are, and different things like that. So therapeutic communication is the Shannon-Weaver communication monitor. The sender takes a thought and encodes it into a message, sends the message to a receiver, and then the receiver decodes the message, sends feedback to the sender. So, and this obviously keeps going and going and going. And in the middle is that message. Could there be some misinterpretation with that message sometimes, depending on how we communicate? Yeah. Age, cultural, and personal experience shape how a person communicates. So both social and personal influences will shape a person's thoughts. So some cultures encourage people to express their emotions about illness and injuries. However, others see this as a sign of weakness. So it really does depend on what cultural beliefs the patient has, and sometimes we have to be able to understand those. Cultural and personal experiences shape how people communicate. So tone, pace, and volume of a person's language tells us about the mood of the person communicating, and does provide some insight into the perceived importance of the message. So, body language and eye contact are greatly affected by culture. Some people will not look you in the eye when they're talking to you. But however, some do want eye contact. They want you to look them in the eye and tell them what's going on. So, if a person, like this person up at the top has this, laughter and feeling, facial expression going on as far as body language, and if I walked up to this person and they said that they're in pain, I'd have a difficult time believing. However, this may be the way that this patient, deals with pain sensations. They may just laugh. Sometimes when we go down a roller coaster and that stomach drop feeling, I laugh a lot of times just to make that feeling go away. So facial expressions, body language, and eye contact are physical cues. This guy down here at the bottom, he looks pretty angry, and he looks like he's got a lot on his mind, and it sounds like you're fixing to hear about it. So this may be a tense situation Well, we have to walk up to it very carefully and approach this patient very carefully. So, noise is anything that dampens or obscures true meaning of the message. Little noise or other factors may make it difficult to understand the patient or the patient to understand you, or other factors that affect communication, such as lighting, distance, and obstacles. Um, Proximate is a study of space and how distance between people affect communication. So the appropriate distance depends on the levels of trust and intimacy between the two parties. So as a person gets closer, a greater and greater sense of trust must be established. Some people will let you get what I call into their personal space. Most personal spaces are, within arm length of a person. Um, Me personally, I don't like people getting into my personal space. I have a problem with that. Uh, so unless I have a strong relationship with you. Uh, Verbal communications, asking questions is one of the most important fundamental functions of the advanced EMT. So, we're going to use open-ended questions that require the patient to provide an answer with some kind of detail. So, use this whenever possible. This will help the patient open up and talk to you and tell you what's going on. That way, you can get some response back and understanding what the patient is going through and feeling. So, an example may be what seems to be bothering you today. A lot of times I'll say, what's going on today? What made you call the ambulance today and want us to come out and help you? Closing questions can be answered in a very short response. These may be for these patients that won't respond back to you, won't open up to you as a provider. So, they won't. Sometimes you have to use these to get those yes and no responses so that you can figure out what's, going on today and how to help this patient. So, an example may be, are you having trouble breathing today? Is this, worse trouble than what you're usually used to? Or, do you know what triggered it to make it worse? You know, are you having pain in that leg? Do you know on a scale of 1 to 10, they can give you a number. So here's some example of open-ended questions and some examples of some closing questions. There are many powerful communication tools that you can use when trying to obtain information from patients. Facilitation is encouraging the patient to talk more and provide more information. Silence is giving the patient space and time to think and respond by not speaking. Reflection is restating the patient's statement to confirm your understanding. Empathy is being sensitive to the patient's feelings and thoughts. Clarification is asking the patient to explain what he or she meant by an answer. Confrontation is making the patient who is in denial or in a mental state of shock focus on urgent and life-critical issues. Interpretation is summing up the patient's complaint. And explanation is providing factual information to support a conversation. And then summary is providing the patient with an overview of the conversation and the steps you will be taking. So sometimes we have to go through all of these, and in one patient. Sometimes we have to use one more than the others. When interviewing a patient, consider using touch to show care and compassion. And I do find this more appropriate and more encouraging with the geriatric population. Sometimes with the pediatric population too, if a guardian is there and will let you touch, show care and compassion to the patient. The teenage years, can be very, very defining to the teenagers. So you really have to be careful about, whether they will allow you to touch them or not. When interviewing patients, try to avoid providing false assurance. A lot of times, a patient family will come up to you, or a patient, are they gonna make it, or do they have a heartbeat? And sometimes, you'll just have to tell them, look, we will provide ventilations for the patient, and we're doing chest compressions to help, the heart pump blood throughout the rest of the body. So, mechanically we have taken over for this patient, giving unsolicited advice. If you don't know about a situation, don't be giving advice you don't know nothing about, or refer them to somebody that can give them the correct advice. Asking leading questions. Don't try to lead a patient into an answer. Interrupting the patient, and sometimes this can be difficult, because some patients, they just want to talk. Sometimes, and, either you do it politely, but I would not recommend you doing it abruptly. Using why questions, and speaking in professional jargon. Be careful with that, because sometimes these patients don't understand what you're talking about, or they may misinterpret what you're talking about. So try to break it down. So family, friends, and bystanders may be valuable during the interview. Be sure to allow the patient to answer if he or she is able to and wants to, even if well-meaning family members attempt to answer for him or her. Do not be afraid to ask her to step aside for a moment while you can talk to the patient, him or her. And you may need to decide if having family and friends nearby will make the patient more or less anxious. So sometimes the family and friends may make the situation better. As far as for the patient themselves, sometimes they may make it worse. Sometimes this is why the patient calls. Some of them may just want to get out of a situation for a little while, so that they can kind of recharge what's going on. So, a recommendation for this is, get the patient in the back of the ambulance and start transporting. That way you can do your interviewing questions there. Go rules: keep calm and reassure the patient. Make eye contact at all times. Establish that rapport with your patient. Try to tell the patient the truth. Be aware of body language. Speak slowly and clearly and distinctly. And ask and speak in a calm and confident manner. So, communicating with difficult patients, diffuse the situations by staying calm. Some patients can become hostile and defensive toward the EMS provider. So diffuse potential escalating circumstances by staying calm yourself. Talk openly and honestly to the patient. Always consider the safety of the scene. Call for law enforcement backup when necessary. Try to never threaten your patient with anything, and never respond in kind to a patient who threatens or insults you. So don't threaten a patient that's going to threaten you, or has already threatened you. That's not solving the situation. If you feel like your safety is being compromised, leave that scene, call for law enforcement, advise them what's going on, and have them come out and assess the situation also. Communicating with older patients. Do not assume an older patient is senile or confused. Be diligent for objective changes, and when possible, give patients time to pack personal items. Um, identify yourself. Be aware of how you present yourself to these patients, and try to look them directly in the eyes. Speak slowly and clearly and distinctly. Explain what's going on before you do it. Listen to the answer the patient may give you, and show the patient respect. And do not discuss the patient in front of him or her. Be patient. So allow them to pack up some stuff if they really want to take it. I'm not saying you're the moving service, but if you can get their hearing aids, their glasses, or dentures before they leave. A lot of these patients in the older community are so scared that once they go to the hospital, they may never come back home. So they will want to take some stuff with them. And sometimes they need this stuff. Now hearing aids, may be very important to them to get that proper care, glasses to be able to read, and different things like that. Communicating with children will likely be frightened, when you get there. Um, this is, because of that young age, and they've only been around their mothers and mothers and fathers for the most part of their life. So you're pretty much a stranger coming in. Um, be Don't panic if you do somehow they do get, or correction, they may panic if they do get separated from their parents. Use friendly eye contact, smiles, and calm and subdued explanations, and place yourself at the child's eye level. If they're laying flat on a stretcher, go at their head, and put your head across from them. Um, if they're standing or sitting, even if sitting in the parent or guardian's lap, kneel down to them and make that eye contact with them. Involve a parent in the patient's care if they're there, or the guardian. This will give the patient reassurance, that child patient reassurance, to know that someone is there. Demonstrate on a sibling or a parent. If you're going to splint that patient's arm or wrap a gauze around it, put it around yourself so that you can show that it doesn't cause harm. We do try to keep some toys on the ambulance itself so that we can give them out. The different um, tools that you use to treat these patients, all of them have, some type of decoration to it to make it look like a toy, make it look more friendly. Be honest with these patients. If it's going to hurt, you need to tell them, even down to that, AccuCheck finger prick, and especially if you're going to do IVs and different things like that. And we'll talk about that. Respect that child's modesty and tell the child what you're doing and why. So communicate with hearing impaired patients. Have normal intelligence and usually are not embarrassed by their disability. Um, so let the patient see your lips. A lot of them are really good at lip seeing. Even those patients that have minimal hearing deficiency. Um, a lot of them are good, really good lip readers. So hearing aids have become way expensive. I didn't realize how expensive some of these hearing aids were. So please be careful that you do not lose them, or that they're forgotten at the house. If you let a family member take them, please note to the patient that who has those hearing aids. Okay, um, so that they understand. Steps to take effect when communicating. Have a paper and pen readily available. Something I have communicated to some patients like that by paper and pen only. If the patient can read lips, face the patient, and speak slowly and distinctly. Like I said, a lot of them good, those patients are really good lip readers. Don't ever shout to these patients. Even those patients that have, we're told that they're hard of hearing, or you have to shout in their ear. I try not to go directly into their ear and shout. I usually try, maybe I try to communicate to a family member or somebody they understand already. Listen carefully and ask short questions and give short answers. So, hearing impaired patients, this is some sign language that, may be quick for them to understand. For those patients that do use sign language on a daily basis, there's a lot of different guides out there to help you communicate with those patients also. Visually impaired patient, ask the patient if he or she has any vision. Some of them can see peripherally, and some of them can only see directly in front of them. Some of them it's just blurred a lot, and they may not have vision but have one eye. So expect your patient to have normal intelligence. Don't think just because they're blind they don't comprehend what's going on. And make sure you really do explain what your every action is on the back of that ambulance. That way, they know what's going on. Stay in physical contact with your patient as you begin care. If the patient can't walk to the ambulance, place their his or her hand on your arm and guide them. Transport mobility aids such as a cane with the patient to the hospital. A lot of them do have guide dogs. They're easily identified by special harnesses. If possible, transport the dog with the patient. That dog can be a well-behaved animal on the back of your ambulance, but you need to make sure that they are registered. Can be some complications if that dog is not properly trained to carry out this task. So find out if a patient does speak in some English, especially communicate with non-English speaking patients. Use short, simple questions. Point to parts of the body. Have a family member or friend to interpret. And a lot of times, this is going to be your gold card right here with these patients. It's having that family member, even if it's a young person, to be able to interpret for you. A lot of times with these patients, it's the younger generation that helps, helps them interpret in the English. Consider learning some common phrases in other languages in your area. Do not overlook needs of people with speech or communication disorders. Touch and eye contact are helpful bridging mechanisms, and family members and caregivers can facilitate your efforts. So with special needs patients, sometimes it is a communication issue. Sometimes it is a touching issue or what they're culturally diverse to. So bringing those family members and those primary caregivers with you and help you out facilitating these patients. A lot of times children with autism may have difficulty in developing language skills. So you're going to encounter maybe difficult when communicating with the patient with autism. So address questions to the caregiver. Alzheimer's, dementia patients also try to communicate with the patient. Sometimes that's a good go. A lot of times it's not. So hopefully there is a caregiver there to help you communicate with them. So communicate with other healthcare professionals. Giving an oral report to hospital staff members who are at least at your level of training or higher. So here in the state of North Carolina, we highly recommend you talking to a registered nurse or above, such as your mid-level providers and your doctors and different things like that. That doesn't mean to not communicate with radiology, respiratory, certified nursing assistants at any level. That don't mean that they need to be left out. But give me your primary oral report to somebody at registered nurse level or higher is really important. That way, you're going to an equal level or higher. So give the chief complaint. Give the patient's name. I have a hard time sometimes remembering the patient's name because I focus really on the patient care aspect. Describing that illness and injury. With the advancement of technology, a lot of us will take pictures of vehicles or how far a patient actually fell. So different things like that to give that visual component. So detailed information, any important history, pertinent findings of the physical exam, and the patient's response to treatment, whether it be good or bad, and then vital signs, of course. So most EMS communication systems today are based on radios. You must know when to use your communication equipment and what to say when you're transmitting. Also know how to operate that communication equipment. With the Viper system now, you may have to push the top button, wait a second, and then start communicating. That waiting a second gives it time to dial in, digitally over the network so that you get the whole message and then you don't miss something. So that was one of the biggest and the hardest things to adapt to when we went from the low band stuff to the high band. So all radio operations in the U.S. are regulated by the Federal Communication Commission. So they have 5 principles related to EMS responsibilities, allocating specific radio frequencies for use by EMS providers, licensing base stations and assigning appropriate radio call signs to those stations, establishing licensing standards and operating specific specifications for radio equipment used by EMS providers, establishing limitations for transmitting power output, and monitoring radio operation. It is a two-way system. So some base stations may have more than one transmitter and/or receiver. They may also be equipped with one multi-channel transmitter and several single-channel receivers. So a channel is an assigned frequency or frequencies used to carry out voice or other data communications, and a frequency is the number of cycles per second of the radio signal. A base station is any radio hardware containing a transmitter and receiver in a fixed place, and it's got to be fixed. Locations may include dispatch centers, fire stations, ambulance bases, or hospitals. So it's more power and higher, more efficient antenna system than mobile or portable radios. Mobile and portable radios mounted inside of a vehicle. Used to communicate with the dispatcher and other public safety agencies or medical control. Operate at lower power than a base station and assigned to a specific frequency. Sorry about that. All right, simplex is push to talk. Release to listen on a half duplex system. Duplex uses two different frequencies at the same time to permit simultaneous transmission. Multiplex is combining both analog and digital signals, can simultaneously transmit two or more different types of information, such as voice and telemetry, in either or both directions over the same frequency. A number of VHF and UHF channels, commonly called med channels, are reserved exclusively for EMS use. A repeater based system is one that receives messages and signals on one frequency. It does automatically retransmit messages on a second frequency, and you are able to receive low power signals, such as those from a portable radio from a long distance away, and rebroadcast with all the power of the base station. So basically, those repeater-based systems reboost the signal so that it can be transmitted in a much further distance. So, some concerns: your ability to effectively communicate with other units and medical control via radio depends on how well the weaker radio can talk back. Okay, especially those digital high-powered radios, they're not in a great place for signal. They're not going to be able to talk back to you. So, if you're at the scene, you may not be able to clearly hear the dispatcher, but may not be heard or understood when you transmit. I know a lot of the Viper radios don't communicate well through metal walls, and we have a lot of metal buildings going up sometimes in a rural area. There might not be great visual signal across the whole public safety area that you serve, so that having that understanding also. Success of communication depends on the efficiency of your equipment. Equipment should be in service at least once a year. Outdated or broken equipment should be removed from service. Do not subject equipment to dusty, damp, or wet environments. Radios are becoming more and more what's the word? more and more durable. They're making them waterproof. They're adding, safety measures as far as extra um, defense devices as far as covers and different things like that in case they are dropped there. They do become outdated, every years, and they should be updated when they become out. AEMTs often communicate with the receiving facility by cellular phone, can also use satellite phones instead of a cellular system and go into a satellite itself. So telemetry capability of measuring vital life signs and transmitting data to a distant terminal. Transmitting ECGs from signals from the patient to a distant receiving station. If we do a 12 lead, we're able to transmit that via either, cellular devices or digital signal to a server, and that server prints it out to the printer right there at the patient. Or, hopefully in the near future, all of our real-time stuff that we are putting in, will be available to the receiving facility in real time, so that they understand what's coming besides just our little calling that we do. Interoperability allows all agencies involved to share information with each other in real time, connects landline, cell phones, and computers. SafeCom communications program has been developed by the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, and it's a set of national interoperability standards intended to develop capability across communication systems. So, use nationally standardized frequencies for disasters and other communications. Basically what that is, if we go into a natural disaster or mass casualty incident, we have the capability of switching over to channels that are used across either statewide projects or national projects. So the Association of Public Safety Communications Officials International has established digital radio hardware standards, P25 standards, which we just went through a couple of years ago. And basically this is to ensure that digital radio manufacturers develop systems that are compatible with each other and older systems. Computer-aided dispatch is a computerized method of call handling. So the computer collects and manages call information and makes recommendations for which EMS units to is closest based on existing dispatch policy. This data for dispatch can be sent directly to the individual EMS unit by data transfer. CAD can recommend emergency actions to the dispatchers to relate to the patient or bystanders at the emergency scene. Mobile data terminals or computer terminals inside the ambulance that directly receive data from dispatch center, displays the address, and some instances brings up a map and allows you to follow directions to the scene. Also allows for communication without the use of a radio. So, you may be able to type in a message and it goes to all kinds of different MDTs inside of a unit. And y'all can all, communicate that way without having to tie up the radio itself. Backup communication strategies. Your backup plans ensure you can maintain contact when usual procedures do not work. Landline backup links fixed components such as hospitals and public safety agencies. The simplest backup plan, of course, is written. Standing orders. Cell phones, also some lower high band systems are less expensive sometimes. However, limitations, maybe if a disaster affects your primary communication system, like it takes out all your cell phone service, then your towers will be, and your communication will be affected as well. So, notification, someone tells EMS an emergency exists, dispatcher determines relative importance of the 911 call, They do have protocols and procedures they have to follow also. They obtain information such as possible, as much as possible information about the emergency. Um, what's the address you're at, not that. Back in the day, we used to sometimes ask about the home address, but we need to know addresses of where you're at the time. They assign appropriate units, depends on the level of call. If they use the EMD system, assigning it that Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta call. That way they can send first responder units with you also, or law enforcement if their policy and procedures appropriate them to. It provides key information to the responding unit. So communications from service headquarters with the responding unit via dispatch radio or pager. Appropriate crew is contacted and informed about the call, the nature of the call, illness, severity, location, number of patients, response by other agencies. So, and they can advise you if a road's closed. Maybe you forgot this road was closed, and that may be your quickest route to there. Or besides you driving all the way up to that road closure and then having to turn around and make a detour around, if they tell you beforehand, you can do the alternate route. Also, always inform your dispatcher when you arrive on scene. That way they know that you're there, and they can either release the phone call or at least let the caller know that you are there also. In route communications, once the ambulance is on the way, dispatcher may ask call for additional information. So their policies and protocols allow them to go ahead and dispatch out that unit. Need question asking. So dispatcher may give pre-arrival instructions to the caller. They may instruct them to do CPR. They are even able now to help those counter pulse, fill full pulse, give aspirin therapy, different things like that. So all that depends on your local protocols directed by your local medical. Excuse me. So communication during transport, you communicate with the receiving hospital. Give them a report over the radio so that they know what's going on and they know what's coming into the facility. So be a radio or cellular devices. Reassess your patient conditions and vital signs. Some services transmit PCR data to the emergency department, and I think that's a new wave of the future, is that real-time transmission. So communicating with medical control in hospitals, consult with medical control, notify the hospital of an incoming patient, provide opportunity to request advice on any further orders that you may have or the receiving facility may have, and advise the hospital of special situations. Maybe you're coming in with that cardiac arrest or that code trauma, code stroke, code steaming. That allows them to prepare for your incoming patient, and they may alert certain people at their hospital so that flow of patient care can go quickly. Communicate with medical control hospitals, plan and organize radio communicating before you transmit. I always try to teach new people, hey, when you get on that radio, have your plan. And you train new people, tell them, give them a layout on a piece of paper, and that way they can give that patient care report in a concise, precise manner. And, don't use up much radio time doing that. So people that just transmit and have no freelancing on the radio, it becomes a long, drawn-out process. And sometimes the receiving facility may not even really understand what you're coming in with. Depending on how your protocols are written, you may need to call medical control for permission before you can administer certain medications, determine transport destination of patients, and stop treatment or decide not to transport a patient. Medical control physicians base their instructions on information from advanced EMTs. Never use codes to receiving facilities. They don't live in the pre-hospital world, so you need to talk layman's language to them, or even talk your professional jargon that you use. So once you receive an order, repeat it back. Do not blindly follow an order that does not make sense. Sometimes different online medical direction doesn't understand what your capabilities are within your particular local area. So you may need to advise them, hey, look, this is what we can do here and what we can't do. So, I want to make sure that you understood what I can and can't do. And that medical direction may change their mind about something. All right, patient care reports are a legal document. Don't ever forget that. They can be used in a court of law at any time. Records officer care from dispatch to hospital arrival. And a lot of times there's two different types. You may have written and electronic. The NMSIS has been collecting patient care information for research purposes since the 1970s. Has identified special data points needed to enable communication and comparison of EMS runs between agencies, regions, and states. So, written documentation usually has a 24-hour time, or uses 24-hour military time in your documentation. That way, if you go and document AEMT, there may be a misinterpretation of that. Learning to write effectively and accurately is an important advanced EMT skill. Every report needs to be complete, accurate, and legible. So, don't worry, try to write like a physician if you're doing handwritten. So, you only use objective information. Subjective information includes information that was told to you, but that cannot be seen, such as the patient's description of his or her symptoms. So, every report needs to be complete, accurate, and legible. There are many different types of PCRs. Here we have a lot of digital ones. That's an image trim down at the bottom that maybe looks like. I know that there's an ESO out there, EMS charts is out there. Expernaut looks like that one's the one on the top right. So there's a lot of different manufacturers out there of ePCRs. So legal issues with a PCR no bias or personal opinions of your own should appear in your report. An example may be the patient was drunk and out of control, so this shouldn't be in your report. You might want to rephrase that with the patient presented with an auto mental status and stated he had 8 beers today. So, it should be complete, well written, legible, and professional. Use proper spelling, proper grammar, and accurate terminology in your report. Always try to express to people, if you do not understand the meaning of a word, do not use it in your report. Because if you get asked that meaning in a courtroom, and you're not able to give a definition of it, this is going to make your statement, questionable. Also, there is spell check, in a lot of these EPCRs reports. Please use it. PCR serves 6 functions: continuity of care, legal documentation, education, administrative information, essential resource record, and evaluation and continuous quality. Document any changes in the patient's condition. Patient information collected on each PCR could be the chest complaint, level of consciousness or mental status, vital signs, assessment findings, and patient demographics. Your narrative should include time of event, assessment findings, emergency medical care provided, changes in the patient after treatment, both good or bad, maybe a refusal of care, maybe a refusal all in general of any kind of care, or just a refusal of, hey, giving this patient oxygen and they didn't want to wear it, so you need to document that. Staff person who continued care, and significant negative findings and important observations at the scene. So, I get, don't try to deem who was wrong or right at a car wreck. Hey, the significant front end damage or significant rear end damage, rollover car, Even being careful at a constant or a shooting has two calibers and different things, exit wounds and entrance wounds. We have to be careful of sometimes. Um, are we a forensic person also? If you're leaving something out of if you leave something out or record it incorrectly, do not try to cover it up. You may just want to mark through it and put your initials up above it. So, falsification results in poor patient care and may result in suspension or legal action. If you do discover an error and has your right to report, draw a single line horizontal through the middle of the error initial and write the correct information next to it. After you submit or written report, follow the same process of error correction by drawing a single line through it, and then doing a different ink or something like that. So sometimes we have to do addendums to these reports. That way they are timestamped and different things like that. So only the person who wrote the original report can revise it. So ensure all medical procedures performed or documented, insurance codes obtained, and the appropriate medical necessity signature obtained also. PCR should indicate why the patient may have needed emergency care. Medicare sets a standard for medical necessities. So an example of some significant findings that indicate medical necessity for ambulance transport is patient was in shock, needs to be restrained, has uncontrollable hemorrhage, requires emergency treatment while being transported. We talked about refusal of care as a common source of lawsuits. Document any assessment findings and emergency medical care given. Have the patient sign a refusal form. Also have that witness sign as well. And complete a PCR for these patients. Special reporting situations are gunshot wounds, dog bites, some infectious diseases, suspected physical or sexual abuse, and use of mutual aid services, mass casualty incidents also. If you think you've been exposed to something, that may be a special report situation too. So make sure you document what you found in your EPCR and then follow your local protocols about exposures policy. So submit the report and all the information is considered confidential documents. You may not have time to complete the full PCR while at the hospital. So most systems will have you drop a report or transport a report. Some type of documentation that says real quickly what you did and didn't do. Some services still use the handwritten for that so that they can leave it there. Some services have that real-time transfer of data, so that helps with that situation also. So this is the end of Chapter 4. Or analog voice systems that have been digitized and compressed by a computer. So these digital signals are clear and they allow for transmission of a greater volume of data in the same bandwidth. They also communicate with other digital radios and with analog radios. So a lot of these systems were assigned with either 800 or 900 megahertz systems, and instead of being assigned to one or two frequencies, many frequencies are assigned to a group. Thought of as a virtual channels that appear and disappear as conversations occur. Doctor or talk to a provider equal or higher care. Comply with the requirements of health departments and law enforcement agencies. Those that we have to make sure that we turn those patient care documentation over or we report it. In those cases that we talked about in last class, fulfill your organization's administrative needs as far as being able to bill for those that work off of a billable service, statistics, research, what we can do to make the service better, and different things like that. Do remember that in the state of North Carolina, you're supposed to have those documentations and documents completed within 24 hours of the call, depending also on your local policy. Some local policies do have differing statements about that.